It was supposed to be just another routine traffic stop. Bright blue sky, open road, and a calm afternoon that felt like nothing could possibly go wrong. But what happened next would end a cop's career, spark outrage across social media, and leave everyone asking the same question. Asterisk, why would someone get fired? For doing the right thing, asterisk. This story begins with a police officer. Let's call him Officer Daniels. He wasn't a rookie. He'd been on the force for a while, knew the rules, knew the risks, and believed in treating people with respect. That was his thing. He didn't see the badge as a free pass to throw his weight around. He saw it as a responsibility. And on that day, when he pulled over a black SUV for what looked like a minor traffic violation, he didn't expect anything unusual. Just a quick conversation, maybe a warning, and then move on. But behind the wheel of that SUV was someone else who also wore a uniform, an Army sergeant, calm and cooperative, who politely asked one question. Asterisk, why was I pulled over, asterisk? Now here's where everything started to shift. Instead of answering directly, another officer who had pulled up alongside Daniels escalated the situation. His tone changed. His posture got aggressive. And suddenly, what should have been a calm interaction turned into something tense. The Army sergeant stayed composed. No yelling. No sudden moves. Just asking again, what's the reason for the stop? You could tell from the body cam footage, because yes, this was all caught on tape, that Officer Daniels wasn't comfortable. He looked back and forth between his fellow officer and the sergeant. You could see the hesitation in his eyes, like he knew things were headed in the wrong direction. But what made him different was that he didn't stay silent. Later that day, Officer Daniels made a decision that changed everything. He went back to the Army sergeant. Not because he had to, not because anyone ordered him to, but because he felt it was the right thing to do. He apologized. A simple, honest apology. He said sorry for how things were handled, said he didn't agree with how it all went down, and wanted to show respect, one uniform to another. You think that kind of integrity would be respected, praised even. But instead, that moment, caught on video, shared online, viewed by thousands, would lead to Daniels being called into the department the next day. At first, it sounded like a formality, but then came the real blow. He was let go. No warning, no official violation cited. Just a quiet, uncomfortable explanation that he had undermined a fellow officer and violated protocol. But Daniels knew what this was really about. He hadn't broken the law. He hadn't endangered anyone. All he did was show empathy, and in doing so, shine a light on a problem the department didn't want to admit existed. Word started to spread. The body cam footage got leaked. Clips of the apology began circulating on social media. People were divided. Some called him a hero. Others said he should have stayed loyal to his team. But for the Army sergeant, it wasn't about politics or headlines. It was about finally being treated with dignity and realizing someone in uniform still had a heart. As more people began to hear the story, questions kept piling up. Why did the department respond so harshly? Was this really about protocol or about protecting a broken system? And more importantly, how many other officers like Daniels were out there? People who wanted to do the right thing, but were too afraid of losing everything. Officer Daniels didn't give interviews at first. He kept quiet, let the storm play out. But the pressure was building. Messages poured in. Former officers, military veterans, and everyday citizens, people who had seen the footage, started speaking up. They saw something rare in that moment. Not weakness, not betrayal, but courage. What kind of world are we living in where a police officer can lose his job just for saying asterisk sorry asterisk? The story doesn't end here. In fact, this is just the beginning. Because as Daniels stood on the other side of his career, badge turned in, uniform folded up, he faced a decision of his own: stay silent or speak out. And what he chose to do next caught everyone off guard. At first, Officer Daniels stayed low. After getting fired, he tried to keep his head down, hoping the story would blow over. But the internet had a different plan. The video of him apologizing to the Army surgeon was spreading fast. It was clipped, reshared, remixed. People were reacting with strong opinions, some praising his courage, others criticizing the police department's decision. And in the middle of all this, Daniels was just quiet. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know what to say anymore. He'd always thought that doing the right thing mattered. But now it seemed like it had cost him everything. His phone started ringing more than usual. News outlets wanted interviews. Podcasts sent invites. Advocacy groups reached out, offering support. Even strangers messaged him with words like, "Thank you. We saw you, and you did the right thing." But behind those kind messages was a growing tension. People weren't just supporting Daniels, they were angry. Angry at the system. Angry that someone like him could be punished while others kept their jobs, even after much worse behavior. Meanwhile, the Army surgeon, whose name was later revealed to be Marcus Reed, also started getting attention. He hadn't wanted the spotlight either. But the footage of him staying calm and respectful, even while being treated unfairly, made him a kind of symbol. He spoke in a few interviews, always with composure, always measured. And every time he was asked about Daniels, he said the same thing. That officer showed me respect when no one else did. I'll never forget that. The public conversations started to shift. People weren't just talking about one apology anymore. They were talking about the bigger picture. About accountability. About policing culture. About how one honest act could shake the walls of silence in a system that rarely admits when it's wrong. And through it all, Daniels was still trying to figure out who he was without the badge. He missed the job. Not the politics, not the pressure, but the people. The chance to help, to be useful. That part still lived in him. But things were far from quiet. Inside the department, tensions were rising too. Some officers supported Daniels in private, saying they admired what he did. But none of them were willing to speak out publicly. Not yet. There was too much risk. Whispers started to circulate about what really happened behind closed doors. About how Daniels' firing wasn't just about protocol. About how certain higher-ups didn't like that the apology made the department look bad. About how someone had pushed hard to make sure Daniels was removed quickly before the story grew legs. But they were too late. One evening, about 3 weeks after everything went down, Daniels received an anonymous envelope in his mailbox. No return address. Inside was a copy of an internal memo. It was stamped confidential and dated just days after the traffic stop. The memo wasn't just about him. It mentioned potential exposure from unauthorized engagement with civilian subject post-incident. And most importantly, it included a sentence that stood out like it was glowing. The officer's behavior may suggest alignment with anti-department narratives and could threaten unity within the ranks. That sentence hit hard. He sat with it for hours, reading it again and again. It was never about the apology. It was about control. About sending a message. Don't step out of line, That realization changed something in Daniels. He had stayed quiet to protect the badge, to protect the people he still respected on the inside. But now it was clear. The silence wasn't helping anyone. A few days later, Daniel showed up, unannounced, at a community town hall. It was a small event, nothing major. Just local folks talking about recent issues in policing and what needed to change. He wasn't on the list. No one expected him. But when he stood up and said, "I used to be a cop," the entire room went still. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just told the story. Exactly how it happened. What he saw, how he felt, and why he chose to apologize. And then he shared the part no one else knew yet, the memo. The room was quiet for a long time after that. And then slowly, people started to clap. That was the first time Daniels realized his voice still mattered. The video from that town hall went viral. Again. But this time, it wasn't body cam footage. It was raw, personal, human. People started demanding answers. Why was he fired? Who made the call? Why was showing basic decency seen as a threat? But the more noise the public made, the more pressure the department felt. And that's when things really started to unravel. Whistleblowers from inside the department, people Daniels had worked with, began leaking more details. Old complaints, covered up investigations, and internal text showing a culture of fear and silence. The studio lights were bright, and for a moment, Daniels almost felt like he was back in uniform. But this time, there was no badge to hide behind, no fellow officers to rely on. It was just him, alone in front of the camera, with the weight of everything that had happened over the past few weeks pressing down on his shoulders. The interviewer, a seasoned journalist known for his hard-hitting questions, leaned in with a calm but firm expression. "Officer Daniels," he said, his voice steady, "you've had a lot of time to think about what happened. The video, the fallout you're firing. What do you think went wrong?" Daniels took a deep breath. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair, but this time, his voice didn't tremble. It was steady, resolute. What went wrong was that somewhere along the way, we forgot the reason we became cops in the first place. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about us versus them. It was about service, protecting people, doing what was right. The journalist nodded but pressed on, but the department didn't see it that way. They fired you, and you faced public backlash. Do you regret apologizing? Daniels paused. The question stung, but he knew his answer. No, I don't regret apologizing. I regret that the apology needed to happen at all. But when you look at a person, especially someone who's served in the military, someone who's put their life on the line, and you see them being treated unfairly, you have to speak up. You have to make it right, no matter the consequences. His words hit like a thunderclap. The studio, once full of the usual hum of equipment and staff, seemed to go silent for a moment. The tension, the weight of the last few weeks, seemed to hang in the air. Daniels didn't just speak for himself. He spoke for everyone who had ever felt powerless in a system that claimed to protect but often failed to do so. The journalist leaned back, letting the words sink in before asking the final question. "What's next for you, Officer Daniels? Now that you've lost your job, what's your plan?" Daniels didn't hesitate. "I'm not done. This isn't the end. I may not wear a badge anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm done fighting for what's right. If anything, losing the badge has given me a new perspective, a voice, and I'm going to use it." He paused, eyes fixed on the camera now, speaking to everyone who was watching. "I know the system isn't perfect. It's never going to be. But that doesn't mean we can't make it better. One choice at a time. One apology at a time. It starts with us, the people who care. We all have a responsibility to hold each other accountable." The interview ended with a simple thank you, but Daniels didn't leave the studio just yet. He stayed in his chair for a moment, looking at the lights overhead, reflecting on everything he'd lost and everything he'd gained. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The interview sparked even more outrage and support. Some called for a full investigation into the department's actions, demanding that those responsible for his firing be held accountable. Others launched petitions to reinstate Daniels, arguing that the department had lost a good man. But amid the noise, Daniels kept his focus. He'd learned something during the whole ordeal, something he hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't about fixing the system overnight. It was about making small, meaningful changes. He began meeting with advocacy groups and lawmakers, sharing his experience, pushing for reforms that would ensure no officer would ever face the same kind of retaliation for doing the right thing. But even more than that, he started to find a new path forward. He didn't want to leave policing entirely. He didn't want to walk away from the mission he had always believed in. So he began working with local departments as a consultant, focusing on training, accountability, and officer wellness. He worked alongside communities to rebuild trust, offering his perspective on how officers could better serve the people they swore to protect. In the weeks and months that followed, the media attention faded, but the conversations didn't. The ripple effects of Daniel's choice, his apology, continued to resonate. Officers across the country started speaking up about their own struggles, about the parts of the system they knew were broken. They had seen what one man's courage could do. They were ready to do the same. As for Marcus Reed, the Army sergeant, he never took any credit for the changes that followed. In a quiet moment, he said, "All I did was stay calm." Daniels did the hard part, and he meant it. But Reed's actions, too, were a reflection of the broader message, that respect and dignity were the foundation of any relationship, no matter the uniform. By the time Daniels sat down with his wife and kids that evening, he could see the difference he had made. It wasn't in the headlines or in the recognition.